Let's start now creating our whitewater. First of all, I will create a geometry node. I will change its name to WW or whitewater. I will dive in this geometry node. And remember, I mentioned that we will need 3 elements to start our whitewater simulation. First of all, the velocity volume from the flip simulation. We will also need from the flip simulation a surface volume. And finally, we will need to create our own emit volume. So let's start by importing what we already have. I will create an object merge node. So press tab, then find the object merge. I usually like to change the color to blue. And I will also change its name to merge flip simulation. Now I will go back to my object context into my splash node. And here there's something very important that I want to mention. If you remember, we're outputting the particles from the particle fluid surface node. And this is not exactly the information that we need. We need to fetch our 2 volumes from the actual flip simulation that we cached. So if you take a look at this node, you can click on the information icon and you will notice here, besides the particles, besides these points, we will have 2 volumes, surface and vel. And these are the 2 volumes that we need to input to the whitewater solver. So I will create another node. I will connect it to my file cache, change its color, and call it out compressed sim. So now I will copy this output with Ctrl+C, go back to my whitewater geometry, and paste that output on my object 1. So here is our simulation cache, and again, if we check the information on this node, we will have our particles and our 2 volumes. So let's now create our emit volume, and as I mentioned, we could either use a whitewater emitter or any subtool suited to create a VDB or a volume. So let's create our volume manually for now, and then we can look into our whitewater source. So I will create a simple sphere. I will change its radius just to make it smaller. Then I will add a points from volume node. I'll connect it to the sphere. And in this case, I will reduce the point separation to 0.01. So now if you notice, we have a few points where we originally had our sphere. And now we'll need to create an attribute called emit. So for that, we can use a wrangler. So I will add a point wrangler, connect it below my points. And I will define my emit attribute by typing f, which stands for a float value, then type @emit. And I will give a value of 1, so type =1, and then type semicolon. Finally, press Ctrl+Enter to evaluate the script. Okay, so if you check the information here, we have our emit attribute, but these are still points. Remember, we need a volume, a VDB. So let's now convert these points to that volume. So first of all, let me change the name of this node to set emit. And after this node, I will connect a volume rasterize attribute. The first thing I want to do in the volume rasterize is change the particle scale, make it much smaller. Let's start with 0.01. I will also change the voxel size, make the resolution much larger. So I will change this to 0.02. And remember, the attribute I want to rasterize is the emit attribute. So this is our volume. Let's just double check the information. And here you can confirm that we do have our emit volume, and it's of type VDB. So let's organize our nodes a bit. I'll change the color of these two nodes. I will also add a null. I will call this node out emit. And I will also create a null for my flip sim. I will call this one out flip sim. Change its color as well. And technically now we have all that's needed to create our whitewater simulation. Now, before I go into the solver itself, I want to show you how to create the emit volume with the whitewater source, which will be the method that you will be using most of the time. The reason I created this volume manually is, first of all, for you to understand all the elements that we need. I also think it is important for you to understand how this volume was created, because sometimes you will need whitewater in very specific places or with very specific shapes, and the whitewater source won't be enough to create these very specific sources.